This is the next installment of the Mishpacha tapes. The interviewees for today, and today is, let's get the date on here and the time.
30th of December, 1992.
Now how can you see right inside? That's incredible. That's exactly the date. Our interviewees today will be Saul and June Mayer, the mother and father of Marilyn Mayer. And we'll be talking a bit about their background and their ancestors, and see if we can't flesh out some of the people who are the ancestors of the rest of the Mayer family and the Solomon family and so forth. Okay, this is there's a person missing from the two people we're interviewing. Obviously, this is Saul Mayer, and we'll be bringing his wife June in a little bit later. And I guess we need to start out by, if you could tell us what your current name and address is, and how long you've lived there.
If you don't know it, I'm not going to tell you. Shlomo Ben Moshe.
Shlomo Ben Moshe.
1924 Carter Avenue, Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Okay, and you've lived there for?
29 and a half years.
29 and a half years, okay. Let's start talking about your family tree, if we can work our way backwards,
right.
And we'll stop somewhere before Cro-Magnon man or something, if we can.
You're going to stop a lot sooner.
Okay. Can we talk first about your parents?
My parents?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, my father was Marcus. My mother was Flora. Her maiden name was Strauss.
Okay. Marcus and Flora Mayer. And your siblings?
What is it?
Your brothers, sisters, guinea pig.
I have one brother who is 2 years older than I am.
Okay, and his name is?
Sigmund.
And Sigmund currently lives?
Lives in Flushing, New York.
Okay, and your parents are both passed on at this
Right.
point. Okay. Let's see if we can go a little bit further back than that. How about the siblings of your parents, maybe starting with your father now?
Hey. My father had a brother whose name was Sigmund, a sister whose name was Sophie, another sister whose name was Bertha, and a brother whose name was Monroe.
Okay. As far as you know, that's
as far as I know.
okay. And they are all deceased?
All deceased.
At this point. Now, how about, let's continue on this line. Do you know about your father's parents?
Very little. All I know is my father's father lived in Bamberg, Germany, and he died in 1939.
Okay. You don't have a name?
His name was Jacob.
Okay.
I figured that out myself.
So, and that would be Jacob Mayer
Yeah.
at that point. Do you know that the name was Mayer even when they?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't know my grandmother because she died in childbirth of my father,
Okay.
and his sister Sophie raised her.
Okay. And that's as far back as you can take
Right.
that.
That's all I can go back on that side or the other side.
Okay. Well, that makes things a little quicker then. Your grandfather lived in Bamberg.
Bamberg, Germany, which is in the current what was the current eastern zone.
Okay. Do you know anything about his life there? Do you know his profession? Do you know?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right. He lived there his whole life? Was he?
Yes.
Okay, so he never came to the United
No.
States. Okay. And then, obviously, your father was born
In Germany.
in Bamberg, as far as you know, or not?
Yes.
Okay, so then they lived there all that time. Your father was born, do you know the birth date?
Yeah, 26th of
Did you say-
April, 1886.
26th of April, 1886.
86.
Now, do you know a bit about his life growing up at all, or do you know, what
The
can you
only
tell?
thing I know about his life growing up, and I didn't learn this till later on, I don't think I should put this on tape though.
Please, feel free.
He was in the German army,
Uh-huh.
and he was discriminated against because he was Jewish, even though it was before Hitler, way
Uh-huh.
before Hitler.
Uh-huh.
And,
This would have been right around the turn of the century, yeah?
Well, not about then, a little after that.
Okay.
No, a lot later. it'd be about 1917,
Oh, okay.
just from the war, when there was war.
Okay.
And I found out recently that he deserted and went to the United States.
Okay. Which gives you some insight as to why he left. And
Yes.
now, did he go directly into the Army after school? Do you know anything about his
I don't
schooling?
know anything about his background.
Okay.
The Army part was real hazy. Well, the only thing I know about, he had his own company, Beer Stein.
Okay.
And that's how I knew he was in the Army. I didn't know till about, 5 years ago when my brother told me that he had deserted.
And as far as you know, he never. You just don't know about what jobs he may have held or anything.
In the United States, I know.
Okay, but not in.
Came here, he was a shoemaker.
Okay, but so he might have done that in Europe, but you don't know.
I don't know.
Okay. Now, do you know when he came to? Well, let's stop there for just a minute. It shouldn't take long. You said your mother's family you know nothing at all about, or?
Oh, I know something about
Okay,
the family.
let's
yeah.
go back there a little bit. Now, your mother's maiden name again was?
Strauss.
Strauss. And do you know where they came from?
Yes, from Altenstadt on the Iller in Germany.
Altenstadt on the
Iller.
On the Iller.
And the reason for it being on the Iller, there must be about 18 Altenstadts in Germany,
Okay.
which translated as Old Town.
Oh, all right.
So this one is on the Iller River, so it's Altenstadt on the Iller, which was just south of the city of Ulm
Okay.
and the Danube.
All right. So tell me what you know anything about her parents.
Her parents, her father is Leopold, and he was the town kosher butcher.
Uh-huh.
And his wife's name was Minna.
Okay.
She
And
didn't go to work, she was a housewife. And Marilyn was named for her.
okay. Did I ask you about your grandmother's? Let's see. Let's see. That was your grandmother then.
Right.
You can't go any farther back than that.
No.
Okay. Now the children then, your mother's siblings. Did we talk about them?
Had his brother Leo, and what was Ernest's father's name?
I don't know.
I don't know either. I
Okay.
never met him. And his sister Fanny.
Okay.
And,
Okay. So now they lived in Germany and.
well, yes.
Okay.
And Fanny and Leo came to the United States.
Okay. Did your grandparents ever come to the
No.
United States? Okay. I didn't come
First
in.
generation in this country.
Okay.
Gary, let him explain why he never met the other brother who never came to the United States.
Okay.
Well, he and his wife and kids were trying to get out of Germany when Hitler was there.
Uh-huh.
And this is Ernest's parents.
Mm-hmm.
And they went to England. At least two of them went to England. And the other two were supposed to join them. And between Erna and her mother getting out, the other two never got out.
Hmm.
They died in the concentration camp.
Do you know where?
No. Erna doesn't talk about things like that.
Okay. Okay, so do you know when Erna and her sister came to the United States?
Sister never came to the
Oh,
United
oh,
States.
okay.
She died in the concentration camp.
Okay, so Erna.
Erna came to the United States. I was back in the service, and we were just married, weren't we? So it had to be about 1946, 1947.
Okay. So do you know much about what happened to her during the war?
She went to England
Okay.
with her mother, and they both worked there.
So then, in other words, when they escaped Germany before the war, they went to England.
Right.
Do you know where in England they were?
No.
Okay. And then after the war, a couple of years after the war, then they came to the United States. And where is Erna now? Well, let's talk a little bit about what did Erna do when she came to the United States? Do you know? Can you fill
She
that?
went to work.
And doing.
Well, I don't know what she did at the beginning, but she ended up working for the American Kennel Association. She just retired from them a couple of years ago.
And she was in New York for most
Yeah,
of that time.
New York.
And then she retired, and now she lives.
In Lehigh Acres, Florida.
Okay. So she's retired in Florida.
Right.
Okay.
Did they leave England because the only relatives they had left were here after the war?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't think of staying in England.
No.
Okay.
Well, with the war in England, they got out of England before the war ended.
Okay. So that brings them, whatever was left of that side of the family, to the United States. And we've brought your father's side to the United States.
When did your mother
What-
come?
Let's, well,
She came twice.
okay,
Actually, my father came in 1916, not 1917.
okay.
My mother came in 1915 and went back and came back in 1917.
Why is that?
She came for a visit, went back.
Okay. And again, this was to New York
Yeah.
each time? Okay. Your parents met in New York?
Yeah,
Can you tell me a little bit about that story? Or
I
you-
wasn't there.
Do you know anything about that? Any of the circumstances? Do you know how they met? Or?
Nope.
Okay.
All I know is they met, they got engaged, and they got married, and they had kids.
Okay. Well, that part's pretty clear, I think.
Religion.
Do you know? Tell me when they got married. Do you know when they got married?
Look in the ring.
I was looking, I think
They were married 30 years the year we got married, and we got married in 46.
Trying to think
they
of
got
the date.
married in 1916,
Yeah,
September 11th.
16. She came
September
back in
11th,
16.
1916.
Yeah, not 17.
She came back.
Yeah, it was they were celebrating the 30th anniversary of the year we got married.
Okay.
The wedding ring
Okay.
with the dates.
Now, do you know where they lived? What's the first house or apartment or whatever that
They
they
lived at 429 East 83rd Street, New York City, New York, in a 4-bedroom cold water flat.
And this is what after they got immediately after they got married.
Bedroom,
Right.
Okay.
That's where my brother was born. That's where I was born.
Okay, that helps clear that part up. Your father was a shoemaker.
When he first came over, but he became a baker.
Okay. Well, tell me about that. When he first came here, did he own a shop? Did he work
No,
for
he
someone?
worked for somebody.
Do you know who that was? Or
No.
Okay. And do you know how long he was a shoemaker?
I think about 8 or 9 months, until one day a guy came in to get his shoes and he couldn't pay, didn't want to pay for them, so he ripped the soles off and gave him the shoes back, and then he quit and walked out.
So he had some temper.
Yes.
Okay. Why don't you tell me a little bit, well, let's wait just a little bit. I would like you to tell me, if you can, some stories about your mother and your father as you can describe their personalities and that.
It's a hard thing to do because my father, from the time that I was born, was a baker. And he was a cake baker.
So this was before you were born at the shoe
Yeah.
incident.
But he was a cake baker all his life, and cake bakers worked at night.
Uh-huh.
So he was always asleep in the daytime and working at night. And when we were kids, okay, we saw him, but I don't remember much of that. But as we grew up, we were going to school while he was sleeping, and he was working while we were home.
So you didn't see your father very
Not
much?
very much, except sometimes on weekends.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Now, when he worked as a baker, he worked for,
Different bakeries.
so he had worked at various places
Yeah.
around there. Do you know any of the places? Could you name any of the places that you know?
They're all individual little bakeries
Okay.
in New York.
Okay. All
No
right.
big companies. That's before the big companies
Okay.
that drove them all out of business.
And your father always then worked from that point on as a baker until he retired?
Until he retired.
Okay. And your mother was a homemaker
Uh-huh.
all of her life?
life.
Okay. So let's go back and talk about the kids again. So Sig came along, when was Sig born?
1970,
His birthday?
June 6th.
June 6th?
D-Day.
Okay. And then you were born,
2 years later,
and your birthday?
8th of July, 1919.
Okay. Now, if you can, it's probably a good point. You already said that you didn't see much of your father, but you saw him some. So, what do you remember about your father? What sort of person do you recall him being?
Well, I can lump my father and mother together. They were both German, strong-headed, strong-minded, and us kids, we were like the army. They gave the orders, we carried them out.
And if you didn't,
Like if we were going to Aunt Sadie on Sunday, we can't say, I don't want to go there, I want to go someplace else. We went to Aunt Sadie. We went to Aunt Sophie, we went to Aunt Sophie. No questions asked.
what if there were questions asked?
There were no questions
Okay,
asked.
there were no questions asked.
Let's forget about that.
All right. So they were obviously disciplinarians. What
Right.
do you remember any stories that stick out in your mind as maybe something? Did you ever do things as a family that you recall that you?
Well, I did something as an individual. My mother was working at the sewing machine doing something, and I was tormenting her somehow, making noise, and I ended up getting a scissor stuck in my elbow. They came flying across the room.
Ah. So your mother had a rather good arm,
Oh
obviously.
yeah, she could have pitched for the
Where my
Yankees.
temper
Okay.
came from.
Okay. You gonna say something? Oh, okay. Okay, so why don't we talk a little bit about your childhood, not necessarily relating to your parents, but tell me about your schooling and your friends in the neighborhood and that sort of thing. What kind of games did you play growing up that you recall?
Tell me which part of it.
Well, tell me what started
You
as
haven't
far
even
back.
mentioned your nickname. You didn't have a name.
What? I understand you had a nickname. Growing up as a child.
Yeah, Shorty.
Luckily, I'm closed up on his head right now, but I'm gonna. Okay, let's bring this back a little bit. Okay.
Tell them the story of you and your brother with the was it the sunburn or?
Oh, the winter?
Yeah, that. Tell them
No,
that.
that's not a story for this.
Yes, it is.
These are X-rated. It's all right. R-rated.
Getting back to this cold water flat with 2 bedrooms, my mother and father had one room, my brother and I slept in one bed in the other bedroom. My brother had a backache. And you're an old farmer, as you know, in those days they didn't have anything like the modern rub, so we had all the wintergreen. So if he and I slept in the same bed with him and I had to rub him down, I didn't want it all over the sheets. So I held my hand over his back and poured a little too much in my hand, and it ran down through the crack into his testicles. And God, I went flying out of that room.
A little pharmaceutical tale from the
And
past.
considering that because the reason they called me Shorty, I came up to about his navel, and we're only 2 years apart. So I wasn't getting too close to him.
Makes sense. Okay. Tell me, that's one interesting story about
That's
Sig.
the only one I had.
Were you and Sig very close growing up?
No.
Okay. Did you had separate interests, or did you fight a lot?
We had no interest.
You had no interest.
We dictated to. Don't forget, we were brought up during the Depression.
Okay.
I worked after school.
Okay,
So
so
50 cents a week, and that was 7 days a week.
what were you doing? What did you do working after school?
You're a pharmacist.
Well, I know what
you
you
know
do.
what they do.
I know, but I'm
Dust
gonna-
the shelves, clean the bottles, bring the stock up from the basement.
Well, did
make
you work for a
suppo-
pharmacist?
Press suppositories in the hot summer.
Okay. What was the name of the drugstore you worked at?
Greenberg's
Okay.
on 83rd Street and First Avenue.
And how long from what age did you work there? Do you remember how old you were?
God.
And how?
1933, that means I was 14, I guess. 13. About a year, 13 to 14.
Okay. And so that was was that your first job? Did you do?
No, I had another job. I delivered newspapers for a candy stand. It was 7 newspapers every morning.
Okay.
That was big business.
So you had a little route of 7 places to go to drop the newspapers off. Okay. What about Sig? What did he do? As far as working?
And boss you around.
I assume you had to take the money home to your folks when
Yeah. I took my 50 cents home. I gave it to my mother. She gave me a dime back.
Okay. And Sig, you don't recall what he might have done?
He worked in the grocery store.
Do you know where exactly?
Yeah, Daniel Reeves, New York, on York Avenue between 83rd and 84th Street.
Okay. And worked there. That was just, as you recall, his first job?
Yeah.
Okay. And surely you must have had some time to yourself as you were growing up in terms of, did you play games in the street?
Yeah.
What kind of games did you play?
Stickball, boxball, handball.
Did you have a lot of friends?
Huh?
Did you have a lot of friends in the neighborhood?
I did for a while until we played football one day in the street. I was the smallest guy in the crowd, and they tackled. Nobody knew what to do with the ball. They threw it to me, and they piled on me, and I broke my collarbone.
Ah, that would do
And
it.
I went home like this. My mother says, "What happened to you?" I was white as a sheet. She says, I said I fell off the curb.
Because you didn't want her to know that you were playing ball.
She'd have killed me. She'd have broke the other arm.
Okay. And tell me a little bit about school. How did you find school? Did you find it?
I loved it.
Did you like school?
Yeah.
And you did well in
I
school.
was like Marilyn. I'd be number 1 in the class. I was done good.
And
That's why when I broke my collarbone, I had a problem going to school because of my left collarbone. I was
Right.
left-handed.
See.
I had to learn to write right-handed, Mary.
And tell me where you went to school.
I went to PS 77 in Manhattan.
And that was
That was to the 6th grade.
okay. And then
Then I went to PS 30, which was a junior high.
okay.
Then I went to New York Industrial High School, and then I transferred to Samuel Gompers a year before it opened. Believe it or not, there were 3 of us in school,
Yeah.
and we set up all the shops, because I was an electrician at the time, at school.
You learned this in school,
Yeah.
the electrician trade.
You went to vocational high school.
That's okay.
And Samuel Gompers was a brand new one opening in the Bronx, and I was transferred over with 2 other guys, and we did all the electrical installations of all the equipment there.
Okay. And then you
Was this
grad.
considered part of your apprenticeship?
I got A's for that year in all my subjects, math and everything else.
Are you paid for this work?
Huh?
Or is it considered part of
No,
school?
part of my curriculum.
No.
Okay, so then you graduated from Samuel Gompers.
Yeah.
And this
I was
was-
first graduating class, there were 3 of us.
Oh, sorry. Because it was the year
First
before
three,
they really
yeah.
really started.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you graduated from
Grade
high
1,
school
2,
in
3?
what year was this?
God. I must have been 17. Must have been 1937.
Okay. And did Sig also graduate from high school?
Yeah.
And where do you know where he went?
Then he went to work in an electrical shop as an apprentice.
Okay. And that was his whole career for his entire life, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Working in New York for.
Electrician, became a union member, and he was a union electrician.
Okay. Okay.
Don't say anything about the union to him, he'd get mad.
Okay. Did we say where Sig is living right now? I can't recall.
Yeah,
if we did.
Flushing.
Okay. Okay. Let's
phone number?
let's drop back for a minute to your folks. Did they live out their entire lives in New York in the same house?
No.
Okay. So tell me what happened.
In the about 1939, they moved from 83rd Street to 87th Street because they got a real good place with that running hot water and heat, which the other place got hot water eventually, but no heat. And then, must have been in the late 1900, after the war, my brother bought an apartment out in Flushing.
It was after we were married.
Yeah, but it was after the war too. And my folks and he moved out there, and that's where they stayed the rest of their lives. He's still there.
Okay. And when did your father and mother pass away? Do you have?
God, you know those dates, I know. Oh, my father died in 1968, that I know. Because I retired in 67, and it happened in January 68.
I was in the 6th grade when he died.
I was not working.
Rochelle was in college when he died because she went home to stay to help Grandma.
Oh, I'm sorry, it was Kennedy who died in
It
63.
was 1968.
Yeah.
And I
Okay.
think my mother died when, about 1980, wasn't it?
And are they?
Wait, I was pregnant with, no, 1979.
I was-
No, 1980, you're right, because I was
Okay.
pregnant with Mark when I visited her that last time in
Okay.
November.
Can you tell me where they're buried?
Yeah, at Cypress Hill Cemetery in Brooklyn.
Okay. What illness or disease was it that took your parents to?
My father had Parkinson's. Well, I don't know if that was the cause.
Probably didn't kill him, but
No. The nurses at the hospital killed him when they dropped him out of bed
Oh,
and
wow.
broke his hip.
But he was already hospitalized for something else.
Yes.
okay.
And my mother, I think, just died of old age.
Okay.
She was sick, and she died in her sleep.
Okay. All right, let's go back to you now. You graduated from high school. Now, what was the next step?
I went to work. Well, this was right after the Depression, and the guy who worked in the drugstore that I was working in had a brother-in-law who owned a radio shop and a wholesale radio parts place. So he got me a job with that guy. And I worked there for about 2 years. And I finally got a raise. When I got the raise, they decided that I should work longer hours because I got the raise. So I told them what to do with the raise, and I went home. So then I got hell from my mother for quitting. It was not nice after they gave me a job, and 2 years later, I should quit. So I said, I can get a job any place, and she laughed at me. So I decided to go see somebody down at Philco. If you've ever heard of those people, years ago. Philco, New York. And I went in and I asked for one of the vice presidents who I'd known from working in this store. So the vice president comes out to see me and he says, what can I do for you? I said, I'm looking for a job. So he said, gives me an application to fill out. I said, that's the end of that. So I filled it out and left and went home. Next day I had a telegram. Come down and report for work. So I worked there till 1941 when I got drafted.
Okay. And how did you find that out? You got home, you opened up the mail, and there was your draft.
Greetings.
Oh, didn't you ever hear these greetings from the President of the United States? You have been selected.
Okay. So, so what happened from there?
From there, 19th of January 1941, I went to 86th Street, New York Avenue, to our local Social Security office, where I met with all my contemporaries. We were all stuck on the bus and sent up to Lexington Avenue to get on the subway and go down to 34th Street to the Armory for a pre-induction physical. And that's the last I saw of civilian life until 1945. From there, we went right to Fort Dix, spent 3 days there, getting half of World War I and World War II uniforms, then getting sent down to Fort Benning, Georgia, where I became a soldier.
Basic training.
Basic training within an assigned regiment. It was not like it is today where you have a basic training center. I got stuck right into a rifle company and we got trained right there.
Okay. And what happened then? From there, where did you go? This is still 1941.
1941, and during that period at Fort Benning, they decided to try a new type of division, a mechanized motorized division, which means splitting up the whole thing into different elements. And somehow I managed to get into the recon squadron, which was mechanized cavalry. And I got in there on the pretext of becoming a radio operator.
Mechanized cavalry would be what, tanks or?
Tanks and armored cars.
Okay.
In an infantry division, not like an armored division.
Uh-huh.
Because of reconnaissance to lead units. And while I was there, I found out that they had a supposedly radio mechanic who didn't know how to use a soldering iron. So I was showing him how to use one, and the lieutenant was watching. He says, "You're not a radio operator, you're my mechanic now." So I became a radio mechanic. So then the organization we moved to Camp Gordon, Georgia, which is in Augusta. And while I was there, I got in a fight with a lieutenant who thought he knew more than I did. And I said, "Lieutenant, if you can get a commission, so can I." And I went to the orderly room and filled out a form to go to Cavalry OCS. So I get called to the review of the OCS board, and they look at my background and said, "You should go to the Signal Corps." Okay. So in October 1942, I went to Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. In February 26th of 93, not 92, 42. Can I say 42?
Mm-hmm.
All right. 26th of February 43, I was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Signal Corps.
What is a signal corps? I don't know what that is.
Signal Corps in the Army is responsible for all communications
Okay.
for the Army.
Okay.
So when I was interviewed, they asked me what I'd like to do when I'm commissioned. I said I'd like to go with an army signal company. Fine, I got my wish. When I graduated, they sent me to Air Corps Supply School.
What happened? They tell you one thing and then they send you somewhere.
That's for one thing.
Probably the best thing that could have ever happened to me, because I didn't leave the States till Went to a depot where they had a school. We went to school a half a day. Went to the depot and worked a half a day. And while I was there, I met Dan Daly, who was the second lieutenant in the Signal Corps. You know who him is, don't you, Marilyn?
Why don't
The
you?
actor, isn't he?
Yeah.
Why don't
That
you?
actor, he died.
Just recently.
Okay. I was going to make sure that you explained in case someone didn't know who that was. Okay.
And
You were going to school. What was school about there? You said you went.
supply school, signal supply school,
Okay.
to learn about the Signal Corps. Then I was interviewed, we were all interviewed when we were ready to graduate from that. That was a 3-month course. And I was selected to go to Patterson Field, which was right up the street outside of Dayton.
Right, Patterson.
No, it isn't.
It
At
wasn't
the
right
time, it was
Patterson?
Patterson Field.
Okay.
Patterson Field was on the west side of the highway. Right field was on the left side of the highway.
Okay.
Since they built the interstate, they put them together and became Wright Patton. The AMC buildings where your uncle worked, I worked in one of them. And that was back in 1946. And that was Patterson Field.
And specifically, what were you doing?
I was in the overseas priority classified equipment section. You can figure that out.
Well, tell me what sort of supplies you were dealing with. Hopefully, it's been
You
declassified by this point.
You tell me, because the colonel called me, interviewed me, and he called in a first lieutenant, and he assigned me to him. And he takes me to his office, and they give me a nice big executive desk, all polished with an in and out basket and a swivel chair, and a telephone, and a secretary. And I sit there, and I look in the in basket, nothing happens. Well, nothing's in the out basket. About 5 to 12, the lieutenant, first lieutenant would run in, he'd open his safe, throw his papers in, close it up again. He says, go to lunch, I'll see you at 1 o'clock. So, I don't know if you're ever in that building at AMC. They got a cafeteria there, so I go there and eat, go back, get to my desk. The lieutenant comes in, he opens the safe, takes out his paper, he says, I gotta go to a meeting. Off he goes. This went on for 3 weeks. I looked at the secretary and I said, how does anything get done around here? She says, I don't know, but it gets done. So after 3 weeks, a piece of paper comes on my desk. I'm transferred to Mobile, Alabama.
You've done such a fine job
Yes.
sitting at the desk and going to lunch.
So I go down to Mobile to the signal section there and I report in. And I got to see Colonel Richardson, who's going to assign me. So I go down to Colonel Richardson's office. First day I sit outside the office for about 3 hours. Go to lunch. That afternoon I'm sitting there again. The guy comes over to me and says, Colonel wants me to take you around and show you what the place looks like. So, okay, for the next 3 days we had fun going around looking at everything. I go into one of the shops where they're trying to fix a radio and the guy's got a chisel and a hammer trying to remove something. I said, wait a minute. I got a screwdriver and unscrewed it for him. I got to help tell him. So that was another 2-week job, sitting outside the office waiting. Finally they called me in, Colonel Richardson. I'll never forget him sitting there, a real grubby guy with hair growing out of his ears. He says, we've been reviewing your record and we got the perfect spot for you. Cincinnati, Ohio. Best assignment I ever had. 660 Lincoln Avenue. There's no base, no nothing, just a warehouse.
And you were just in charge of the warehouse?
No. I was the warehousing officer. But we had 17 officers, 1 enlisted man, and 575 civilians, of which over 450 were women, and of the 450, at least 400 were single.
Oh,
And I lived at the L.B. Harrison Club on Victory Boulevard in Cincinnati. I wonder what that place looks like today. And I was there about 13 months.
Did you ever do anything?
Oh, yeah.
Besides-
now, so what was in this warehouse?
What we supplied was all the communication and radar equipment to the aircraft manufacturing lines.
the basis for
Government
the...
furnished equipment. And a lot of it was classified radar.
Okay. So all these officers were there mostly as supervisory people for
Well,
civilian
yes,
people? Is that-
like they had the commander, an executive officer, personnel officer, all that kind of crap, transportation officer.
I see.
I was the warehouse officer.
Okay. So, and how long did this go on?
Well, it could have gone on for a long time except for my mouth. I was dating a gal in the office, another officer. She worked for him, and he was trying to date her, and she wouldn't go out with him. So he went and complained to the old man. The old man got me in his office, started reading a riot act to me. And I just told him, I looked at him, I stood up at attention, I said, sir, you can get everybody in this place to kiss your ass, but I won't. And I walked out. Not a word was said for 3 days. All of a sudden, a messenger comes down with orders, sending me to Warner Robins, Georgia.
So how long were you in Cincinnati then? About
13 months.
Okay. And that was a cush assignment for you. That was pretty nice.
It was expensive. I wasn't happy about leaving, but I wasn't sorry that I left.
What sorts of, you told me a little bit earlier today that you went to Crosley Field to watch the Reds play?
Oh, that was when we first got there. Another lieutenant and I, we had nothing to do. We were going to see the town. So we rode the trolley, and then we got off it, and we're walking. Some guy drives up and lets us know we want to go see a baseball game. Why not? So we took us. And he had the box next to Powell Crosley, the owner of the team. And this guy was a big doctor in Fort Thomas, Kentucky. Well, Fort Thomas is a big place. I think that's where the Cincinnati airport is, isn't it?
I don't know.
It's not in Cincinnati.
No, it's in Kentucky. It is in Kentucky.
But
Okay, so
then I went to Warner Robins. And
I mean, you saw Dizzy Dean and Daffy Dean.
That's only one afternoon pitching. That's no
Well,
problem.
that's something for posterity. You
That's
saw
not for
history.
posterity. If you're getting into baseball trivia, that's something else.
but you did see their posteriors as they were pitching for posterity.
Yeah, I was on third baseline. They were right-handed pitchers.
There you go.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so now you're in Georgia.
Yeah, down at Warner Robins, which is in Macon. And I
Okay.
was sent to the lowest thing I could get to is a crypto score. And while I was there, I had to get a crypto clearance, which is the worst one.
This is code.
Yes.
Okay.
It's way like cryptograms.
And after a week there, I ended up teaching the wire course for telephone wire course. Then, one day I get a phone call that I'm wanted at the base headquarters. So I go down there and they send me to personnel and they say, here's 5 men that are assigned to the 75th Service Group. And we find out you're assigned to it with special duty at the school. So since you're the only officer, they're yours. So here I'm a commander of an organization that just started that day. We have no place for housing or any damn thing else, just 5 men and me. And while I'm standing there, another guy shows up who was assigned, and he graduated in the class before me at Monmouth, so he outranked me. So I walked over to him and I said, welcome, Lieutenant Head. Are you in the 75th Service Group? He says, yes. I said, there's your men. I'm going back to school. And I walked out. So that was my command experience.
Okay, and how long, and then, so what did you do then?
Well, and then when the service group really formed, I left the school and joined the group, and I was the signal supply officer for the group.
Okay.
And the service group at the time, we usually had 2 service groups that combined to support 4 bomb groups, which was a wing. In other words, we had 2 bomb groups we were responsible for, and the other one had 2, but we didn't know about the other one at the time. So when we staged at Warner Robins, then we had to go to Hays, Kansas for training. But we couldn't get to Hays, Kansas because of another outfit there. So en route, they dropped us off at Oklahoma City. And we sat around there for 2 weeks until we could get to Hays, Kansas, and then Hays, Kansas. Then we did our training for overseas, because then we knew what we were going to support. We were going to support B-29s. So that was that.
Okay, now, let's put a little time stamp on this. When is this?
1945. 1944 to 45.
Okay.
Then when we staged at Hayes, Kansas, a beautiful place.
I've
Been
been
there.
through there.
The old center of town is still there. I took you through there once, remember?
Mm-hmm.
Still got those big wooden steps going up to the stores and the the tracks right in front of it. Beautiful place. Then we had to go to Seattle to go overseas. But fortunately, or unfortunately again, I was selected as one of the advance party to the fort. So we spent 16 days at the Olympic Hotel in Seattle. Spent an hour a day out at the fort to see when it arrived. And that was it for 16 days. The day we had to board the ship, the whole outfit came in on a truck convoy from Fort Lawton. 5 of us climbed in a cab with all our equipment, helmet, guns and everything, and drove down to the fort and got out. It was fun. Then we went to Guam. 27 days on the seas to go to Guam. And I like cruises.
I was just gonna say that.
Do you remember which ship you took?
Yes. I'd love to forget it. The good ship Kota Baru. It was Dutch registry out of India. It was used to take pilgrims to Mecca. So I can imagine the ship it was. 12,500 ton displacement, which was like a cork in the Pacific. We were so valuable. Our only escort from the United States to Hawaii, which is the first leg of the trip, was a blimp the first day. And the second day, it was gone.
The blimp was there just to let anyone know in case you had been sunk, that you had been sunk. Is
Yeah.
that basically what?
Then when we left Hawaii, we sailed, the next stop was Inuitak.
Now, the war's over? The war's almost
The
over.
war in Germany was over, not
Okay.
the one in Japan.
Okay.
We still had to sail between Wake and Truk,
All right.
but that was no problem either. But the thing is, we had a patrol chaser escorting us to Inuitak. And then from Inuitak to Guam, we had 2 PCs. But that was fun.
What'd you do in Guam?
Guam? Oh, that was field day. Went swimming.
What were you supposed to be doing in Guam?
Well, no, I had a warehouse there, and our biggest job was killing rats
Uh-huh.
because they were eating all the equipment, eating into the equipment, I should say. We used to set traps every night all around the place.
Are you still a lieutenant at this point?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's another sore subject, which nobody will understand, so don't worry about it.
All right. Okay, so let's talk.
The reason I was still a lieutenant is the rules, the directives of the Air Corps at the time was if you went overseas, you had to take somebody in their authorized rank of the TO, that table of organization, and they could be promoted 1 grade over. So when I went for overseas interview, I said I didn't want to go with the outfit because I was a 1st lieutenant, and the slot calls for 2nd lieutenant, so I can't get promoted. So they said, we agree with you. So they cut special orders authorizing to take an overgrade lieutenant in that spot, so I could never get promoted.
Okay, so now you're in Guam,
Yeah.
and
We got B-29s,
okay,
and we're flying bombing missions over Japan.
and your warehouse had the supplies to keep the planes going. No.
Just the communications and radar.
Okay. Part of the missions that the planes have.
I'm like a doctor, I'm a specialist. I don't do the whole airplane, only one piece of it.
Okay. And how long did this last?
We got there in probably about February of 45. The war was over with Japan in, I think, June or July of 45, and I left there in October 45.
Okay. And
And the reason I left in October, I should have left sooner, but to get me home faster, They put me on an airplane crew rather than send me on a ship.
Which you were probably thankful for.
Yeah, I was very thankful for it. Because every time that plane was supposed to leave, there was something wrong with it and they delayed it.
Oh.
I went home 2 months later than I was supposed to. And the people who went by ship were home already.
Okay, so now when you went home, where did you go? Where did you fly to and where did you end up?
I flew to San Francisco,
Mm-hmm.
got on a train, went to Mitchell Field, New York, and processed and got out of the service.
You were discharged.
No, I wasn't. I was put into reserves.
Aha! Okay. Okay, so now, what happened then? What did you do after you had been processed
I
in
joined the 5220 Club.
5220?
Yeah.
Which stands for
See, that's something you don't know about.
I don't know. Could you share that with us, please?
They get $20 a week for 52 weeks while you're unemployed.
Aha, okay.
I don't want to work. If I can get $20 a week, well, I'd work.
Was
So-
$20 a good salary for that?
Oh, yeah, in those days.
Okay, so what did you do with your time?
Nothing.
I mean,
I met guys that I got out of service with. We go to the movies, we go out and bowl, we drink, we do everything.
so, okay, you enjoyed some
Then
time.
I met some broad.
Oh, really? Yeah, who would that be?
You don't know who the broad is?
You carousing around in the 5220 club. It could have been anyone.
No, my mother belonged to a club that when I went to public school, and she was still a member, PS 77 Mothers Club.
Mhm.
And every year they had a dance. So I'd just been home. I wasn't out of the Army yet because I got out in December,
Mm-hmm.
and I had 3 months leave. So I wasn't getting out till the 19th of March. So I was in uniform.
Okay.
So I got dragged. You know, who in that neighborhood had a captain for a son?
Oh, so you were
I
captain?
came out as a captain
Okay, you were promoted as
Yeah.
you. Okay, okay.
because they couldn't promote me while I was in, so they
Right.
promoted me when I got out.
Right. Okay, so now you went.
So, and I met a gal from the Bronx who was there with my cousin,
Okay.
actually her girlfriend. But I have to relate it the other way because it was a cousin. That's how she got to come. Right?
Okay, so your mom insisted you go to this dance.
Well, I'd have gone anyway.
Okay, so you went by yourself with a friend.
What, the family?
The whole family goes.
It
to
was
this.
back to the old story again, the family.
Okay, so you go to this.
But not my father, because he worked.
Okay, so you go to this dance,
Yeah.
and now exactly how was it that you first saw this broad as you
We were all in a group because my cousin was there.
Okay, so you met up with him when you were there, and then.
And I had to find a way to get her to dance, even though I couldn't dance.
Oh, so you were attracted to her when you saw her.
I didn't want to be attracted to a man, no, so she was there.
Okay.
I was
He's so
attracted to her.
flattering.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
I was attracted.
Okay, and so how did you get her to dance?
Well, I just asked her if she wanted to dance. We danced.
So that was pretty
That
clever.
was the end of it again.
Okay, so, and this, of course,
Did he dance well?
this, of course, was
That was a shake of the
June
head.
Cohen
Yes.
that you met at the time. And this particular time, would you have some handle on exactly when this was, or?
It was February 1946.
Okay, all right. Well, that seems like February 1946, a real good time to perhaps pause here and give you a chance to refresh yourself, perhaps. Good. And we'll come back with the second half of the Mishpacha tape and answer some more questions about the other side.
Yeah,
of
bring the
family.
other side up to that point.
And we'll go from there.
Then the
So
fight starts.
we will be back in what will seem to you like no time at all.
When are you going to play?
We're on.
We are. We're back, and
Okay.
this will be the second half of the Mishpacha tape for the Mayer and / Cohen clan. Before your viewing screen now sits June Cohen Mayer, introduced briefly in the last half of the tape. And we're going to go back and, like we did before, talk about the family tree and see who we can pick out of the past.
Okay.
Go ahead and tell me who you are and where you live right now, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, my name is June Mayer. I live in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And it will be, I think, 30 years this August that we have lived there, or July. And what else do you want to know?
Okay, that's good enough for picking out where you are right now.
Okay.
Your parents, I need names and...
My father's name was Harry Cohen. His Yiddish name was Henoch. My mother's name was Sophie Borowski. Her brothers later changed their names, all of them, to Barrows.
It was Borowski.
Borowski.
Okay. And they were changed to Barrows.
Barrows, Barrows,
Okay.
for business reasons.
What business was that?
A couple of them were in the laundry business, and one was in insurance. And a couple did almost nothing.
Okay.
I can tell you about them later.
Okay, let's back our way through. Okay, and how about siblings? Have you any siblings?
I don't have any siblings with both my mother and my father. I do have a half-sister. My father was married before he married my mother. He had been married.
And this half-sister is your only sibling?
She's
or half?
my only sibling.
And this...
I am not in touch with her.
Her name is?
Her name was Ida. Her married name was Alfred.
Okay, and her married to your father, so she would also have been a Cohen.
She was a Cohen.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Let's go back a little further here. Your father and his family. Now, your father...
My father and his family come from Russia.
Okay.
Somewhere near Odessa. I don't know the name of the city,
Okay.
but it was a small shtetl
Okay.
near Odessa.
Okay. Let's talk people for a minute. Your father's parents, do you know who they were?
My father's parents were Ephraim and Jenny is all I know. I mean, I was named for her.
Okay.
And they called her Jenny. What her actual name was, I don't know.
All right. And your father had two wives.
My father had two wives. My father was married. I don't know what her name was.
Now was this before Jenny or after Jenny?
No, my grandmother was dead before he married at all.
Okay. All right.
My grandfather just had the one wife.
Oh, that's right. That's what we're talking about. So your grandparents were from Russia.
We're from Russia.
And
I have to tell you, I don't know much about my grandmother, but she must have been a very interesting woman in a way. Her oldest daughter, whose name was Rose, was married for the first time in Russia and had a daughter named Molly. And this daughter, Rose, got a divorce, which was unheard of in those days in a Jewish family.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandmother decided that any woman who gets a divorce was not fit to raise a child. And Molly was an infant when my grandparents were coming to the United States. And she just picked Molly up, took her along as her child, and raised her. And her daughter came over later, married again. And although Molly knew who her real mother was, she was never raised by her.
So her mother did come to the United States, you said, but she never... Okay.
She raised her other two children and knew Molly as a daughter, and Molly knew her and her sisters.
Uh-huh.
But she was actually raised by her grandmother.
Okay. Let's try to get back online here for just a minute. Your grandparents, then, you know any ancestors beyond that?
I don't. I know my grandfather taught Hebrew
Okay.
for a living.
Okay.
And that's all I really know about him. I remember him. I was a little girl when he died.
Okay.
He was a tall man with a beard.
Okay.
Abraham Lincoln.
What?
Abraham Lincoln.
It probably wasn't Abraham Lincoln, but okay. And your grandmother, you don't know anything more about her?
My grandmother was dead before I was born, and I don't know anything more about her.
Okay. So obviously your grandfather then came to this country at some point. Your grandmother...
They came together.
They did both come to this country.
With the baby Molly.
Okay.
And their other children outside of Rose were already here.
Okay. So they had left previous. So let's see. Did we
Rose.
talk about all of? Did we talk about
No.
all of your
No,
father's?
my father had, Rose was the oldest, then
Is
there
Rose
was
the one
another.
Stephanie's named after?
No.
Different Rose.
Okay. Rose is the
Rose
oldest.
was the oldest, although she was called Bubby.
Okay.
She was never called Rose. And that was a superstition because she was very sick as an infant. And in order for her to live, they decided to call her Bubby, which would mean grandmother. She should live to be a grandmother, and they always called her Bubby. To me, she was Aunt Bubby.
Okay.
And then there was an Annie, and there was a brother Max.
Are we going in line?
Yeah,
As far
I
as you
think
know?
so.
Okay.
As far as I know.
Okay.
There was a brother Max and a brother Daniel who was called Morris, and I don't know why.
Okay.
And that was it. Oh, no, there was another sister, Becky.
Okay. I'm not having any trouble following this story. I just want to
Yeah.
let you know that right now.
This is the clear story.
Ah, yeah. Okay.
This is
Okay.
the easy side, okay?
Okay. Those are your father's,
My father's
siblings. Okay. And many of them, or all of them, came to the United
Most of them
States.
were here before the parents came.
Okay,
My father
let's talk
came,
yeah.
My father came when he was 17.
And this would be.
I don't.
Do you have the birth dates of you? What's your father's birthday?
I don't have the vaguest. idea.
Okay, or your mother's.
My mother was born. It was either she had two birthdays. She never had a birth certificate because she was born with a midwife.
Okay.
And she was, her mother said she was born in 1888, and her father said she was born in 1890.
Okay.
So my mother preferred the 1890.
Oh,
My
alright.
father, as far as I know, was supposed to be 10 years older than she was, so he was born somewhere
Okay.
around there.
So your father came around, you said, to this country
When he
around?
was 17.
Okay. And your grandparents on that side, then you said they came.
They came later, I don't know. I couldn't give
You don't know. But your grandmother then passed away before you were born?
Before
Or?
I was born. I was
And-
named for it.
Okay. And then your grandfather you knew briefly,
Yes.
as you recall.
I was around 9 or 10 when he died.
Okay, and do you know, did they have a separate place to live when they came to this country? Did they live?
They lived on
With
the
one of the
Lower East
children's-
Side by themselves.
Okay.
Children were all grown.
And did your grandfather ever work when he got to this country? That
He taught
He
Hebrew.
continued to teach Hebrew in
Yeah.
this country?
But not in a school. I mean, he just taught
Privately.
Privately.
Maybe for boys before the bar mitzvah
Yes.
type of thing? Is that what you're
That
talking?
type of thing.
Okay. And then, do you know when your grandfather passed away? Do you have some handle on that, or?
I was approximately 9 or 10 years old when he died.
Okay. What was your birthday? I don't think we even.
I was born December 18th, 1922,
Where?
in New York City.
Okay. And so then your grandfather passed away around 1930, 32 in that area. Okay. Your mother's side of the
My
family.
mother's side of the family is confusing.
Okay.
So let's start with her parents,
That's a good place.
okay? Her mother was born in Germany. And her mother lived with her father and her siblings, and she was the oldest in her family. Her mother was dead. I don't know when her mother died, but as the oldest daughter, it was my grandmother's responsibility to take care of the household
Okay.
and her siblings.
Hmm.
And she had several siblings.
This is before she married.
Before she got married.
Okay.
She had a brother named Michael, a sister named Becky, and a sister that we always called Aunt Lizzie, but I think her name was Lisa, because my grandmother used to call her Lisa.
Hmm.
And after I got married and lived in Germany for a while, I realized there was a German name, Lisa,
Okay.
Liesse, and I think that might have been her name, but she was Aunt Lizzie.
Like an Annalise, maybe, or something
Yeah,
like that.
mhm,
Okay.
like that. As I said, she lived in Germany took care of her father and the children.
Right.
My grandfather,
Her father. Okay. Okay.
I don't know what her father did.
Okay. And this is the
Borowski.
Borowski.
No. This is before she got married.
Oh, right. Who
Her
were they?
maiden name was Steinman.
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 Okay.
Steinman.
Okay. Right. Okay.
My grandfather, who was Israel Borowski. My grandmother's name was Rachel, by the way.
Okay.
Rachel Steinman.
Okay.
My grandfather's name was Israel Borowski.
Okay.
He was born in Poland.
Hmm.
And he married, I don't know what his wife's name was, and he became a widower with two young boys. They were maybe 2 and 3 years old.
Hmm.
His wife was a cousin to my grandmother's family, whether it was to my grandmother or to her father, I'm not sure. And as I heard the story, when she heard of the death, as the head of her household, she wrote a condolence letter to my grandfather, she had never met. And the story goes that he fell in love with the letter. And in the letter, she had said that if they ever came to Germany, she and her father would be most happy to have them visit. And he decided he wanted to meet her. And he took his sister with him, who was helping him take care of his children, maiden sister, not married. And he and his 2 babies and his sister went to Germany, where they met my great-grandfather and my grandmother. He fell in love with my grandmother, and this is where the story gets confusing. My grandmother at this time was 16 years old. They got married. She was 16. I don't know how old my grandfather was.
But considerably older, it's
But
safe to
considerably
guess.
older because he was married
Yes.
and had 2 children. My great-grandfather married his sister, married my grandfather's sister. Are you with it?
Your great-grandfather, your grandmother's father,
Married the sister
married
that came
the
along.
sister that the maiden sister.
Right,
Oh, okay.
Right.
I think we have this.
right.
Oh, do we have names here for? Do you know your great? Do we talk about your great-grandfather now?
My great-grandfather was my mother referred to him as Grandpa Steinman, and I have no
Okay.
idea if he had a first name.
Okay. So it was like a double wedding. Do
It
we
was
have a
like
double wedding?
A double wedding. I don't know if they got married at the same
Oh, it was
time,
from
but
grandmother.
it was a wedding.
Okay.
Now my great-grandfather then had a second family with his second wife,
Okay.
which gave my grandmother more siblings.
Yeah, half siblings.
Who were her, all right.
Who were also her aunts and uncles.
Were also her,
Sister.
no, they were her
Yes, her father's.
Children.
Children.
father's children, so
our
they were
aunts and
her,
uncles.
they were her siblings.
Now they were half sisters and
Half-sibling,
brothers.
half-uncle.
No.
no,
I'm
no,
talking about the
siblings.
next
Yeah,
The
generation.
next generation.
They were
is
just
confusing.
Siblings, half siblings.
Half siblings.
But they were
But
her
when my-
husband's. It would have been her husband's nieces and nephews.
Nieces and nephews.
So make her nieces and nephews
Right,
as well.
they were nieces and
This
nephews
is terribly
as well as
confusing.
siblings.
Okay, we got the picture. Let's,
You got
we'll
the
run out of
picture?
tape on this one, no doubt. Okay.
Got the picture?
Okay, I got the
So
idea.
that when my grandparents had children,
Yes.
their children were cousins
And half brothers and
and
half.
also aunts and uncles.
Right, right.
You
Okay.
know.
Did all of these people, did the majority of these people
They
then come
all
to you?
came to the United States.
God help us.
They
Okay.
were leaving.
We're gonna leave.
My
Okay.
grandfather came to the United States. They married in Germany.
Yes.
And they had one child in Germany between them, my Aunt Sarah,
Okay.
who was the oldest of their children together. My grandfather decided to come over here and establish himself.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my grandfather was I guess you'd call him a carpenter. He made picture frames, wooden
Mm-hmm.
picture frames. And he came over here and opened a business and sent for my grandmother.
Okay.
By the time she came over here, she was 18 years old. She came with a baby, Sarah, and her 2 little stepsons. Traveled alone. And
Okay.
I'd like to see any 18-year-old of yours do that.
For sure. Hopefully they would never have to, but.
Hopefully.
They fly. They wouldn't.
So the
take
rest
boat.
of her siblings and your grandmother's siblings, all those other children, they eventually made their way to the United States, but not at the same time
They were all born in
necessarily.
Germany. All of her siblings
Yeah.
were born in Germany.
Okay, and they all-
eventually found their way over here.
Okay. And we're
By
talking.
the time her siblings came over, my grandparents were well established.
Yeah.
And
And this was about when? Do you have a handle on this?
I don't know. I really
That'd be
think
around the turn of the century.
it would have to be around the turn
All
of
right,
the century.
okay.
Because if my mother was born here,
Right.
and if my mother was, let's say she was born in 1890 to make her happy,
Right.
may she rest in peace, and my grandmother had a baby every 2 years or every year and a half, and Sarah was the oldest, and my mother was next to the youngest, and there were
Late
8 of them.
1800s.
So it could
was-
mean 10 to 15 years after
Right.
that. So.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So if you want my mother's siblings in order of age, the first one was Sarah, who was born in Europe. The next one was Isaac, who they called Ike, and he was born here. Then I'm going to lose somebody somewhere along the way. Then there was Joe. Let me see, we have Sarah and Ike and Joe and Sam and Nat and Rose and my mother, Sophie, and the youngest, which was Numi.
He was the youngest?
Numi was
Uncle
the
Numi,
youngest. Uncle
okay.
Numi was the youngest.
There's one I
You've
okay,
met Uncle
right.
Numi. He was
Okay.
at our wedding.
Now, if you wanted names, I figured out after the fact
Mhm.
that my grandfather's father's name from his gravestone is where I found it, was Nahum.
Your
So my Uncle Numi was named for him. So
Okay.
that's all I know. Is that
your
when I-
grandfather's
My grandfather's
father.
father's
This is
name.
grandfather Stain, no,
My grandfather,
Borowski.
Israel Borowski,
Borowski.
His
on his
father's.
gravestone,
It says Ben
it says
Nahum.
Ben Nahum. so
I
this
see.
is-
Okay.
this is
Okay.
Nahum.
Good. Okay. So now the entire Bronowski
Everybody is here. The
is here.
Steinman family
and-
are here, and the Borowski family. are
Okay.
here.
And your mother now was born here.
My mother was born here next to the youngest of 8 children.
Okay.
But she was raised actually in a family of 10 children because she had 2 half-brothers who my grandmother raised.
Okay. Do you know where they
What are their
live?
They
names?
lived in Otherham.
What are their names? The two
Oh, I'm
half-brothers.
sorry. Lewis and Herman.
Okay.
Okay. Now, where do they live?
They lived on the Lower East Side.
You don't know address or?
I really don't know an address, but
Okay.
they lived there for, I guess, while my mother was growing up. And they eventually moved out to Queens.
Okay.
But that was after all of the children were married.
Okay. And where did we leave your father? Can
My
you help
father.
me? Don't know where.
My father was a house painter.
Okay.
And as I said, he was married to another woman whose name I don't know.
Mhm.
They had one daughter named Ida. And his wife, the story I heard, was that his wife ran away with to Detroit with another man. And of course her daughter, who was at that time 12 years old, went with her.
Okay.
My father, you have to understand, had a violent temper. And he was also a very stubborn man.
Mhm.
And he felt that a 12-year-old girl should know right from wrong and shouldn't have gone with her mother, which we didn't feel was very fair, but that was his attitude. And he didn't want me to know that he had ever been married before or had a child.
So they conveniently were gone, so he didn't have to say
No.
anything about
No,
them.
my mother knew. Of course, he had to tell my mother. In fact, my mother's brothers had him investigated because they didn't want their sister to marry someone who had been divorced.
So, right.
But they found out that the divorce was not of his, the fact that she ran away.
He was
with another
divorced,
man,
but right. Okay. So
I didn't find out that I had a sibling until I was about 12 or 13 years old. I overheard my mother talking to her oldest sister, Sarah.
Mhm.
And I heard my mother saying, I don't know what to do about it. It's not right that he should really go to the wedding.
And this
So,
was his daughter's
This
wedding.
was his daughter's wedding.
Let's
And
back up a little. I think we're getting a little bit ahead of the game here.
Okay.
Did we talk about your parents' marriage and when that occurred? And
They were married in 1920, I believe.
okay.
And unfortunately, when they got married, my father's final papers had not come through. He was not a citizen at the time.
Mhm.
And the law at that time in the United States was that if you marry an alien, you lose your citizenship.
Did it the other way around.
They changed the law a year after they got married. So they got married either 20 or 21.
Okay.
Around that time, in June.
And your mother lost her
My
citizenship.
mother lost her citizenship and she had to reapply for citizenship,
Okay.
which upset her always. I
Uh-huh.
mean, because she felt she was born in
Right.
New York City, which I didn't mention.
Uh-huh.
She was. And I don't know how they met.
Okay. And where do they live?
They lived in a lot of places. They lived in Manhattan for many, many years. Then they moved to first they lived They lived in Manhattan, and then they moved out to Queens and lived. My grandparents had a two-family house, and they lived in the upstairs apartment of that house when I was born.
Okay, now you're
Baby.
you have the half sister. Then that's the only.
I hadn't met her at this point.
Okay, and so that's your only. No, you
That's
had.
my only sister.
So you were an only child, and you were born a couple years after they were married.
I was raised as an only
Where
child.
were you born?
I was born in New York City in the Flower Hospital.
Okay. And
And
where did you go to school?
I went to school in Manhattan, in the Bronx, and in Queens.
Okay. Do you know the
Moved
schools?
around a lot.
Do you recall the schools that you went to?
No. I recall
High school.
the junior high, because that was in the Bronx, and that was called McCombs Junior High School. And it was in the West Bronx. And I went to Theodore Roosevelt High School, which was in the East Bronx.
And that's where you graduated
And that's
from?
where I graduated from. When I graduated from high school, in fact, while I was still in high school, my mother's brothers felt that I had potential, whatever that is, and they wanted to send me to college because my parents could not afford it.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked it over, and I, being a little stubborn myself, decided that I did not want to be beholden to any one of them. And I was going to go to a commercial high school and learn to be a secretary and make my own way, and I didn't need them.
This was the commercial high school that you went
It
to
was a
then?
commercial high school.
Okay.
And I graduated from high school with honors. In fact, I won what they considered a scholarship to a business school.
Mm-hmm.
And I went from the high school to the business school on a scholarship, and I was there for 3 months. And part of the scholarship was for them to get me a job, which they did. And I worked all my life until I got married
As a secretary?
as a secretary.
And for whom? A lot of places? Or?
In a lot of places. The first job I had was Triborough Electric Company, which was down on Bleecker Street, which is in the Village in New York City. And my first job, I worked for $9 a week, which was a lot of money. Most of my friends were only making $6 and $7 a week, so that was really... And I worked for them, I don't know how long it was, but by the time I left them, I was making $10 a week. And I left them and looked for a job. I got a job in Long Island City for the General Diaper Company? General Diaper Company in the office. They supplied diapers and picked up dirty diapers and supplied clean ones to families. And I worked for them for quite a while. And in the meantime, I had taken a test for civil service. And I had passed the test, and I got called to work for civil service. By this time, the war had started.
Mm-hmm.
And I was assigned to Governor's Island, which was very interesting because I had to take a ferry to get there, and it was an Army base. And I worked for the Army Specialized Training
You got
Program.
noise in there.
And what we did was select boys to send them to college before going into the service. In other words, the government paid to give them a specific education, and then they would owe the government
The time back.
the time. So instead of being drafted, they applied for these schools, and they went. We decided which school they went to.
In other words, they were draft dodgers.
They weren't draft dodgers. They wanted an education.
Is this the job that you were doing when you met Saul?
No, that place closed down. I met Saul after the war had ended.
Okay.
And
She was working for a hot
that
dog
place
outfit.
closed down because there was no reason for it anymore. And I was transferred to what they called Manhattan Project.
Ah,
And it was,
the atomic bomb.
but we didn't know it.
Oh,
We knew we were called Manhattan Project.
uh-huh.
And we did paperwork, but we really didn't know who we were working for until they dropped the bomb. Then they dropped.
You mean they
the
told
bomb.
you, or they dropped the bomb?
They dropped the
Oh, okay.
They dropped the bomb, and then we found out that we were the office that did it.
Okay.
And with that, everything was out in the open, and we became the Atomic Energy Commission, and we moved from this place where we were down on the lower Broadway, we moved to the Empire State Building. We worked on the 60s.
Okay, let's take a look at this right here. We have a little action here.
The cat did that.
And there's the culprit.
Petey. No, it wasn't Petey.
No, Sebastian did that.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay,
so we had a little action to the Mishpacha tape.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so,
We better leave. Anyway, I worked on the 65th floor of the Empire State Building. And that was where I was working when I met Saul.
okay. And that
And
pretty,
the airplane that hit on the 51st block?
and you never saw King Kong there, by the way. I'm
Never
sure.
saw King
Okay.
But there was a suicide, wasn't there?
Yeah,
airplane ran
I saw
into
a
the
man
side of the
fall
building.
off the building.
Your impression of your first meeting with Saul, is it pretty much as he described it, or do you have a somewhat
Yeah, I
different?
went to this dance with his cousin Estelle. And he was there, and he asked me to dance, and I said yes.
Had you thought about it at all?
Thought about asking him, dancing with him?
Yeah, or did
He
you?
was the only eligible looking male there, so I danced with him.
Okay.
He was very pleasant to talk to. He had a good sense of humor, and he was a lot of fun. And he asked me if I ever went bowling. And I am not a bowling fan, but I used to go once in a while, and I said yes once in a while.
Okay.
And he said, how about we all go bowling sometime? And I said, all right. And he made the arrangements through his cousin for a group of us, a group of her friends and your brother, I think, who was included in that. I don't
And
remember. Al Meyer, some friends of his. And
Okay, well, let's
we can stop right there.
yeah, we'll go bowling next time.
No, we didn't go bowling.
Oh, but we'll find out what happens at the bowling escapade next time, and we'll be back before you know it. So, good job. Thank you.
Okay, we didn't take up too much time, did we?
Mishpacha tapes, and it's New Year's Day, as you can see by the date on the picture, and we're going to continue with the story of the Mayers, and take up right after where they met in New York. But we're going to backtrack for just a minute here. June wants to relate a story that might have been left out earlier about your father. Go ahead.
Just a little about my grandfather. My mother's father, I wanted to say that I think, as we told you earlier, he raised 3 daughters and 7 sons, and he made sure that each one of the 7 sons had a college education, and in those days that was quite a feat. Besides running a factory where he made picture frames, he also taught at the Brooklyn Seminary. He taught theology, Jewish theology. What other kind of theology would he teach? And years later, when Saul and I were in Portland, we were at a temple, and we were introduced to a rabbi there, and we started talking about backgrounds. And he had been one of my grandfather's students, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Okay.
Okay, I'm through.
Okay. Well, that brings us up to date on that. No, it's
Wasn't that interesting since he was a reformed rabbi?
Yeah, that's true.
all right. Let's continue your story. We talked a little bit about having met at the dance after Saul was. Well, after he sort of left the military, and as we'll find out, sort of didn't. Why don't you go ahead and...
No, let her continue with her
Oh,
bowling
I was
story.
they arranged to go bowling. I think we mentioned that on the tape previously. And just before
that's right.
it was the date for the bowling came through, as a group of people, Saul's cousin Estelle said something to me about, you don't really like bowling. And I said, no, it's not really my thing. And she says, well, I guess the only reason you're going is because my cousin is going. And I said, I don't really need you or your cousin, and I decided not to go. That was how we never went bowling. Now he can continue.
And we haven't been together
We've
since.
never bowled since.
Since then, okay. So how did the relationship continue? Let's talk
You
about
really don't want this one on tape. Unless you want to tell it your way. If you let me tell it, I'm going to tell it
No,
my way.
I'll tell it my way.
We might hear both ways, but go ahead. You
I'll tell it
start.
my way. I'll tell it my way. This was quite a while later, and
Couldn't have been that much of
couple
a
of
while
months later.
because we got married 6 or 7 months after
well, this
we
was
met.
in April.
Yeah.
This was in
Yes.
April. It was in April, and the same cousin, his cousin Estelle, called me and asked me, it was a Saturday, and she asked me if I had a date that night, and I said no. And I said I was going to stay home and wash my hair, and she says, well, instead of doing that, she said, I have an errand to run, and I have to bring something to my Aunt Flora. And she says, how about coming with me, and then we can leave there and go downtown and take in dinner and a show. And I said, okay, sounds fine to me. So I went with her. I'm having trouble.
Talk slower.
Talk slower. And I went
Run
with
out of
her,
breath, you
and
gotta pack you.
when we got to her aunt's house, who was actually Saul's mother, she delivered whatever she had to deliver from her mother. And her aunt said, well, so long as you're here, I can't see any point in you going out and spending money on dinner. You have to stay here and have dinner with us, but you have to wait until the men come home. And by men, she meant Saul and his father. And they were at a ball game. What ball game?
Yankees in Washington, doubleheader.
And so you don't argue with Mom Mayer, we found out. And we stayed. And Saul will tell you that he found me sleeping on the couch.
I didn't say that. I said I walked in and there you were laying on the couch.
Laying on the couch. Anyway, I took a nap and was very bored at the time, but we stayed for dinner. And when dinner was over, then I think Estelle asked you before she asked me, didn't she?
If I
Yeah.
want to go along with the both of you.
She asked him if he wanted to go along with us, and when he said yes, then she told me that she really had a motive in this whole thing, and that she had a date with a married man that we knew, who she was not supposed to be dating. And she was able to tell her parents that she was going with June, rather than saying she was going with Al. And
So a
she
convenient
wanted
excuse.
us to cover for her.
Okay.
And by this time, I was down there. I had no place to go.
And I was snarkered in.
And he had already been hooked into it, so we did. And that was our first date. We went with them.
And how'd it go?
But real fine. Al paid all the bills. And to go home, to take Estelle home, he called for a cab. And when the cab come, June and I jumped in the back seat and let them sit in the jump seat all the way from Greenwich Village up to the Bronx.
But from then on, we started dating.
Okay. And
And we got married 6 months later.
so you were. How about the engagement? When did Saul propose to you, or do you remember?
It actually wasn't a formal proposal. It was just slid in.
Gradually. I think you gave me a ring. Must have been, we started dating in April, and you gave me the ring, it must have been in June, because I gave you the ring that you're still wearing in July for his birthday.
Hold that very steady as you continue to talk.
Stop! Anyway, and we had planned to get married a year from then. We were going to save money and get married. But Saul found that he couldn't save money by living at home because his mother...
And I figured we'd live together until we saved enough money, but she wouldn't go along with that.
No, the truth was that his mother was taking all his salary. By this time you were working.
And okay, well, where were you working? Because we left, of course, you were living the life of leisure,
Until he met me.
and that put a quick end to that.
$20 a week wasn't enough.
He wasn't going to get married on $20 a week.
So what were you doing?
Trying to think about it.
Well, while you think, let's take a little break here.
Clothing,
yeah.
but
We'll take a little break here. Just
I worked for a big coat manufacturer. There were two partners, a bookkeeper, and myself. And they made girls' coats.
That's
Size
enough said
7
about
to
that.
14.
That's
Huh?
enough said about that.
That's right.
wasn't
Let's not waste time on that because the job didn't last that long.
okay. And what happened next?
Well, as I said, we were going to get married. We wanted to wait a year to get married and try to save some money. And by this time, I was working civil service.
And I didn't see why I had to work.
And his mother was taking all his salary and giving him an allowance because he was living at home. And that wasn't, you can't save money on an allowance and still go out.
And she refused not to go out, so I couldn't
And in those days, girls didn't pay their own way.
Right.
So every time he saw me, it was costing him money.
So a decision had to be made.
The decision had to be made, and Saul came to me and said, I'm not saving any money, we're not accomplishing anything, let's get married.
Okay.
And I
What
said,
I said?
fine, yeah.
I don't remember that.
Some words to that effect.
Words to that effect.
So
The last I remember is say, okay, I will, and then she took her foot off my chest.
okay. When she took her foot off your chest, the next thing you knew, it was wedding time. And when was this? Can you tell me about the wedding?
Halloween!
We got married October 31st, 1946. And the reason it was Halloween is because we didn't even realize it was Halloween, as nobody Jewish in New York celebrated Halloween. And it was a Thursday. And if we got married on a Thursday, Saul could have a long weekend, he was getting a week off, and he would be able to add a long weekend to it for a honeymoon. So we got married on a Thursday.
Okay. And where were you married?
We were married in the rabbi's office.
No, we weren't.
Oh, no, we were supposed to be married in his office. We were
But
married
it was
in
one
his
flight
apartment.
up in the temple.
Right, that's a funny story. You want to tell it?
You can tell me.
All right.
We're just about married now. You do the
Okay.
talking.
Okay. We were just going to get married. We weren't going to spend a lot of money on a wedding. Just take our parents and his brother. And at that time, I was also taking my half-sister that I mentioned and her husband. And we went to the rabbi. My mother and I went to the rabbi and spoke to this rabbi about the wedding. And we decided that we would get married in his office. And when I came back to tell the mayors the story, it turned out that his office was one flight up in the temple. And Saul's mother had very bad feet, legs, whatever, and she didn't want to walk up a flight. So we went back to the rabbi and said, my mother-in-law doesn't want to walk up a flight, what do we do now? And he said, well, you can be married in my apartment. He says, gives me the address. But he lived on the 6th floor, but of course there was an elevator. So we decided he would take the chuppah, he would take everything, and we would get married in his apartment. And when we got there, the elevator was broken. And his mother schlepped up 6 flights instead of 1.
But it was worth it, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure.
For her or for me?
Okay, so, you recall the ceremony as being
The ceremony was very, it was
short and sweet.
short and
Short and
sweet.
sweet,
Short and sweet.
orthodox.
Okay.
Short and sweet and orthodox.
So you were married, and where did you decide to live? What did you
Well,
do for?
we honeymooned near Niagara Falls, and we moved in with my mother and father.
With your mother and father, okay.
Yeah, until we could find an apartment.
Okay. And so let's go back to the job situation here now. The coat factory, and then let's take it up a notch now. Where are we going from here?
I don't remember why you lost that job, or did you quit? I think you quit.
No.
Say something.
I'm
Time's going
I'm
by.
trying to think. I don't even remember what the hell I did.
I think.
Oh, I know what I did. They went out of business. They had a fight, remember? And they went out of business.
Mm-hmm.
And then I applied
To go back to school.
to go to school. I went to a mechanical dentistry school under the GI Bill, where they give you money to go to school. And then I went out and got a job with Standard Scientific Supply Company. And I went to that place, and I wanted a job that paid minimum wage. Because every buck I made over minimum wage, my allowance for schooling would go down, and everything that I was making was taxable. So I decided to go in, and I got a job, a shipping and receiving clerk. And after about 2 weeks, one of the bosses calls me in. He says, I can't let you keep this job. I said, why not? He says, you're a captain in the Air Corps, and I can't have a captain doing minimum wage work like that. I says, well, don't worry about it. I asked for a minimum wage job. So I had to convince him I wanted to keep the job. So, okay, so I kept the job. So they were trying to figure out how to give me more money, which they did. Every payday, once a week, I'd get my paycheck, and then Mr. Lewis, who was the treasurer and partner, would come along with an envelope and hand me an envelope with more money in it. You're used to that under the table stuff. And that's the way I worked. All my raises were under the table.
How long did you work for? How long did you work for the scientific?
Till I got recalled in 1950.
So in 1950, you were recalled into the Air Force.
By this time, we had 2 children.
Well, it's okay. Let's back up here a little bit now. So when did the first child come along, and tell me about
First, I
that.
had a miscarriage.
First one didn't come along.
First,
Okay.
I had a miscarriage.
Mm-hmm.
And
And that was when?
that was in 1947.
Okay.
Beginning of 47, I think. And then the doctor at that time told me that I would have to wait at least 3 months before I try to become pregnant again. So we waited exactly 3 months, and I became pregnant with Rochelle.
Mm-hmm.
Rochelle was born in August of 48. We were still living with my parents at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And still looking for an apartment.
Okay.
We finally found one through my friend
Rita.
Rita's parents. Rita's father was the superintendent of an apartment building right around the corner from where my parents were.
Mm-hmm.
And when he knew he was going to have an apartment vacant, he called us and told us. And we took that apartment when Rochelle was two.
Okay.
And just about that time, you got recalled. We were still living with my parents
Yes.
when you got the notification.
Okay.
We were just in the process of moving.
Yeah.
So Rochelle was along, that
Okay.
was one child, and you got the recall notice. So tell me about that. What happened with that?
Well, we came home one night, and June's father says, the mailman was here with a special delivery letter for Saul, but I wouldn't take it. He didn't say he wouldn't leave it. He wouldn't take it, because it wasn't for him. So the next morning, I got up on the way to work, and I went to the post office to pick up my letter. Opened it up, it was recall orders.
Okay. And
Turned around and went home. I called my boss, said, I'm going back in the service, I ain't coming in.
so what happened then? Where did you have to report, and what happened from there?
Well,
This is a funny story. I'm
This
glad
is
I
a
asked
funny
this.
story.
They're all funny
he
stories.
had you were recalled. He had a report to.
I was recalled to Santini, New York, with reporting to Fort Dix, New Jersey for 3 days of processing. And who knows where Santini, New York is? It isn't even on a map.
So he went for processing. So all we knew was that he was going back in the service.
And I was going away.
And he was
to
going
Santini,
away. We
New
didn't know
York.
where he was going. So I decided that he should have a farewell party, right? So I invited all my cousins and my friends and gave him a party the night before he left. And they all got together and bought him a beautiful piece of luggage, huge piece of luggage with his initials on it. And we had a great time at the party. He left in the morning,
About 4 o'clock in the morning to go to Penn Station to go to Fort Dix.
and about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, he rang the doorbell and he was home.
I was processed.
And
Well, they said you're going to Santini. I had to go to Santini now, but no sense going that day, so I went home again. So where the hell is Santini? They told me to go to Mitchell Field and they'll find it for you.
so he was right
So the
in New
next
York.
morning again, I got up early in the morning, got on the subway, went down to Penn Station, took the Long Island Railroad out to Hempstead, then took a shuttle that went from Hempstead to Mitchell Field and got off there. Nobody knew where Santini was. So I finally found out where it was. It was right at Mitchell Field around the back.
Which meant that he was coming home every night.
And you'd have an extra piece of luggage
And
that
we
you
have an
didn't.
extra piece of luggage.
Monogrammed, I couldn't even return
But
it.
what we needed was a car. He needed transportation. And we borrowed money from Uncle Numi that time, didn't we? And he bought a car.
A 37 Ford Coupe with a rumble seat. But you're not too old, because this was 1950, see? For $200.
Okay.
Which we didn't have.
So what was your job at Santini?
I was a squadron supply officer in a radar squadron.
Okay. And how long did you hold this job?
Here and here.
From 1950 to close to the end of 1951,
Okay.
when they deactivated the squadron.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got transferred to Roslyn, Long Island.
And he's still coming home every night.
Okay. And what did you do there?
I was the supply officer for the headquarters, which was stationed there.
Okay. And how long did that one last?
Well, by this time I was pregnant with Marilyn.
Right. 51.
And during my pregnancy, he'll continue.
I got notice to go overseas. And I knew she would love that.
Alone.
But it was unaccompanied.
It was unaccompanied.
You guys would always wait for dependents. And first of all, I didn't know where I was going in Japan, except I was going to Japan. And I went to see the doctors at the base where she was being taken care of, and told them asked him about a deferment because of her asthma. And he said, well, that shouldn't be a problem to give him birth. So I decided to contact our family doctor who took care of her. And I got him to write a letter that said that if she gets too excited or depressed, the asthmatic attack will be devastating and have an effect on the birth of the child. So based on that, I got a deferment.
And I never knew that he was doing this.
After she was born, I had 60 days grace, and on that 60th day, I got my orders
Okay.
overseas.
Well, she is Marilyn Mayer,
Marilyn.
and she was born.
In
15 January 1952.
Okay.
If you don't know, I can't tell
Well,
you.
I do know, but it's your story to tell and not mine. Yet. Okay. Okay, so then you got your orders.
Yes. I
And
went to Japan,
okay. Well,
to the island Hokkaido.
okay. Now this story is going to diverge here, so because I want to get both sides of this. Obviously, well, you're in
She had a
Japan.
ball when I went to Japan.
And June, of course, had a ball while you were gone. So we'll want to hear about both sides of the story. So let's continue, if we can, with you, Sal, and tell me about what happened in Japan and what your...
Not very much. I was stationed at Chitose, Japan, which is on Hokkaido, and I was responsible for all the supplies, the 8 radar squadron sites that were scattered all over the island of Japan.
Okay. And how long were you in Japan?
16 months.
From, was that like March of 52 until... How many months did you say? 18?
16.
Came back in the fall.
Came back in the
Fall
fall
of
of
53.
53
Okay.
with an assignment to Portland, Oregon.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, let's take the story up then now back in New York, right? And your husband has just left. So tell me about your life.
Okay, by this time we had the apartment that I told
I
you
think
about.
he's nosy, you know.
And Saul left. Rochelle was 3.5, and Marilyn was 3 months old. And like he keeps saying I had a ball. It was not very pleasant. I lived in the apartment we had was a beautiful apartment, but it was 5 stories up and not an elevator, with 2 small children. So
Kept you slim.
it kept me slim. Yeah, I kept, you walk up and down and you carry your kids. But it was a long 18 months. For part of the first one summer, I did go away with the children to the Catskills.
Those are
For
memories
summer.
I have.
What?
Those memories I have.
Those are the memories Marilyn has. You ought to ask her about those.
We'll turn the camera on you later on. Okay.
And I spent the summer there. A friend of mine was going with her children, and I went along and took a room. It was a kosher chicken farm. And
Must have smelled wonderfully.
actually, it was very
Not too bad.
nice because the chickens
Couldn't
were...
smell
the
any
chickens-
worse than all the little kids' diapers.
The chickens were quite a bit away from the farmhouse. And the only thing that was hard for me was the weekends, because all the husbands came up on the weekends, and of course I was the only one without a husband coming up. But I will say that it was a wonderful group of young people, and they always included me in whatever they did. And we remained friendly
Everything?
for quite a while. Not everything, but almost everything. And so I stayed home until his 18 months were up.
Okay, so you were posted then to Oregon. So what happened? You told, you wrote, called,
We wrote continuously.
and you knew that you were going to be going to
Yeah.
Oregon then, and while he was still in Japan.
Matter of fact, since mail didn't go out every day, I'd write. Every time I write, I date the letter. So that when she gets them in bunches, she could sequence them
When-
before
when
she
it's going
opened
on.
them.
Okay, so now, what you then shipped back, and you went back to New York and prepared to move. Is that basically what happened then? And this is 53.
December 53.
Okay, you moved to Oregon.
We moved to Oregon. We drove across country with 2 children. We needed a new car. So we bought a car. We
Okay.
bought a Plymouth.
Yes.
And
46.
my family decided, I didn't drive at that time, and my family decided that Saul could not drive all the way across country, all by himself with a wife and 2 children. So they sent my cousin Herbert with us. And
Do you remember that?
you know, sure.
I remember that.
You
I
have to
remember.
know that my cousin Herbert was a New York taxi driver.
Ah,
And if you've ever had an exciting ride across country, it's with a New York taxi driver. And also, Herbert was strictly kosher. He wouldn't eat on the road. So my Aunt Sarah packed him a great big brisket, which he was winter.
7-pound brisket and a big bottle of Pepto-Bismol.
Pepto, no, it was bicarbonate of soda.
Bicarbonate of soda in a
And he
Pepto
kept
bottle.
the brisket
Under the
under
seat
the
of
seat
the car.
of the car, and me and Saul took turns driving. And I had the 2 children in the back seat. It was not a station wagon, it was just a car. And it was not a pleasant trip, believe me. It was not a pleasant trip. Motels across Route 66 were not what they are now. I don't even know if there still is a Route 66.
There is, but it's not what it was.
It's a tourist.
But it was pretty bad.
So where did you end up in Oregon?
We ended
Portland.
up in Portland, which
Okay.
is a beautiful city.
And you lived there for how long?
6 years.
Okay. And your job in Portland?
Basic line officer.
Okay. And are you still a captain at this point?
Yep.
Okay.
But there I got promoted to major.
Okay. Okay. And sometime then in Oregon, within a couple more years,
Ellis.
you had a third child. Ellis was born in his birthday.
Probably the only reason he was born is because it rained a lot in Portland, and what the hell else is there to do?
Anyway, Ellis was born April 4th,
4th,
1955.
Okay. And you lived there for 6 years.
6 years.
And then you got notice of another move
Yeah.
Yep.
And this
To
was-
France.
to France. Okay.
France.
Yes. Duquesne Air Base, France.
And they told us that we packed, and we took everything, we were supposed to take
Yeah,
everything
all
with us.
our
All of
furniture
our
with us.
furniture, everything we were supposed to take with us to France because they didn't have any
Now, it's going to be concurrent travel.
concur, we were going to go together.
Okay.
But we were going to have 6 weeks leave before going.
Okay.
So we packed up the kids and we drove across country because we were leaving from the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided we would visit all our relatives and say goodbye and take off. While we were on vacation, his orders were changed
To Germany.
to Germany. And we
No
could-
dependent.
No dependents.
2,000 pounds maximum
No
household
furniture.
goods.
And there we were with everything packed up to go. So what we had to do, what I had to do, was find an apartment. It was
Well,
too
we
late to
did.
go back to
We was-
Oregon.
I was still there.
Yeah, you helped me find an apartment. We found an apartment, which was not easy to do because I didn't want to sign a lease because I didn't know how long I'd be there. And I had to get the girls in school. So we found an apartment. We unloaded everything. And he left.
For Germany.
By
And
this time,
where did you go?
And
In,
I was told it could be a year before the family joins me.
okay. And you where did you go in Germany?
Spangdahlem, Germany.
And the base?
That's
Spangdahlem Air Base.
Okay.
It's near Trier.
They were okay. So you were told it would be a year. Now what happened?
3 months later,
3
she
months
got
later,
orders.
I got orders to go.
Okay.
So, but I could not take my furniture, so I had to have 2 different shipments. I had a pack for storage, and I had a pack
Pots and
for
pans and the minimum stuff.
minimum stuff overseas. I had to send a car on ahead. By this time, I was driving.
Okay. And you flew with the kids
We
in?
flew with the children.
And
And,
you-
my mother was supposed to go with us.
But she
But
only went space available.
Because she was not his mother,
Uh-huh.
she was my mother, she could not go with us. She had to wait for what they call a space available, like you go now on the airlines, you take a space, you know.
Okay. Let's
So
move
we left
along.
My mother in New York.
Okay. Now you're all in Germany. And how long did you stay in Germany together?
From,
4 years?
Almost 4 years. 4
Okay.
years, yeah.
And
My
you're
mother came later.
and you were you also base supply officer there?
Yes.
Okay. And your life in Germany.
Big base suppliers.
Tell me a little bit about your life in Germany.
Well, when we first
where did you
when
live?
when I came there with the children, there was no base housing available for us, and we were put,
Stayed in temporary quarters on the base.
temporary quarters on the base.
How many bedrooms were there up there with that big?
I don't remember, but it was sure fun to play hide and seek.
Yeah, it was just like an attic.
It used to be
From one-
maids' quarters when it was real high class and everybody
Big
who
rooms with
lived
lots of
on
beds in
base
them.
had maids
We stayed there until the apartment that he had contracted for in a little German town was ready for
Speicher.
us. And this town was called Spicer. Spicer? S-P-E-I-C-E-R.
Okay.
And we moved there. And the children went to school by school bus.
And where did they go to school?
On the base.
On the base or a base
And
school?
all our shopping was on the base as far as groceries, that kind of stuff. There
Except
was,
breakfast.
we used to go to, I used to send Rochelle to the German bakery to pick up fresh rolls.
Every morning.
And we did have a butcher around the corner that had fresh meats. But everything else I used to buy on the base.
And you enjoyed your stay in Germany?
Very
Did you?
much.
It was really
We lived-
educational.
We
for you?
lived on there about a year or so before we moved on to the base. Then when there was base housing, we moved to base housing.
Okay.
because it was much easier for the children, for their activities,
Okay.
to be on base than to have to come home by school bus and stay home.
So you were there for about 4 years, and then the next move.
Colorado Springs,
And this was what? When?
1963.
Okay, and you are. Let's see. You were promoted to a major back in Oregon. Now you're still a major.
Still a major.
Okay, and so where did you end up in Colorado Springs? What was your assignment there?
Supply inspector for the Inspector General's Office of Air Defense Command.
Okay,
Did a lot of traveling.
okay. And where did you find a place to stay? What did you?
Well, we stayed in a motel, the what, Iowa
Iowa
Motel.
Motel
Yeah,
in
Iowa
Nevada,
Motel.
it's still
Because it
there.
had a kitchen, and I was able, while we were looking for a house. When he reported into work, he found out that the wife of one of the men he was working with was a real estate agent. And she called me and started taking us around looking at houses, and found us the house that we are still living in.
Okay, and I think we've already given the address of that house. The kids then at this point, it was 63, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you had like a 15-year-old, you had like an 11-year-old, you had like
Rochelle was in the,
8th, 9th.
she started high school
In Bitburg.
Bitburg. So she was sophomore in high school. And Marilyn, I think, was in the 5th grade, 6th grade, and Ellis must have been in the 2nd, third.
There's 3 behind.
Okay. Let's finish out the dispositions of your children at this point. I think we'll probably
get
get
rid
to
of
do so. How do you? Okay, let's start with Rochelle. What eventually happened?
Rochelle eventually went to Greeley, which was a state college at that time.
Colorado State College.
Colorado State College. It is now a university. It's changed its name.
Mm-hmm.
And she became a teacher, which she never enjoyed doing.
Mm-hmm.
She met Steve Edelman, who was a cadet at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. And the way she met Steve was actually through us. We were attending services up there. They have a Jewish chapel, and we used to attend services regularly. And one of the graduates, one of the years we were there, met Saul. He was from Hempstead, New York. And he told Saul that his neighbor's son, Steve Edelman, was coming up to the academy, that he had never been away from home. And would we look him up and,
Feed him.
take care of him? So as soon as the new class came in, we looked for Steve Edelman, introduced ourselves, and invited him to the house, and that's how he met Rochelle.
Okay.
And eventually they got married.
They were married at Steve when graduated from the Air Force Academy. He was married at the Air
He
Force.
graduated in June of
Of
69,
69,
and they were married in December of 69,
Okay.
When she graduated.
when she graduated.
Okay. And they, from there,
They moved, she went with him to California, where he was stationed at that time.
okay.
From California, they
Now let's just
moved-
briefly go over where they.
Briefly, they went to Dayton, because
Mhm.
he was sent to school to get his master's.
Masters.
And that's where their son David was born. From there, they moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico,
Stacy was
where Stacy was born.
And
And
they
from
went to
there,
the
they
Air
moved
Force
to
Academy.
Colorado Springs, and he was stationed back at the Air Force Academy teaching math. And they lived there for about 4 years. And then they were stationed
In Washington.
in Washington, D.C., and that's where Stacy died.
And through his boss in Washington, he got him assigned to Air Defense Command in the same field as a liaison for the people in Washington.
Okay.
But while in Washington, they adopted Jonathan,
hmm
and they moved back to the Springs,
Okay. Where they are right now.
where they still are.
Okay.
Now,
He
Steve is
retired.
now retired from the Air Force and working for GEO,
Geo.
General something.
Good enough.
What does GEO stand for? General Dynamics.
No, it isn't. It's Geo something.
Okay. Well, let's continue on with the
Whatever.
other kids before we run out of tape and leave. So
Then there was
Marilyn,
Marilyn.
what happened to Marilyn?
Marilyn.
Whatever did happen to
Whatever
Marilyn?
did happen to Marilyn. Marilyn was a very, very bright student. And Marilyn refused to take a test that is given in Colorado for scholarship. It's called the Betcher Scholarship. And if you win the Betcher Scholarship,
A Betcher.
a Betcher Scholarship,
Used to get stuff?
yes, you did.
I don't remember.
But you didn't want to
You
go to
get-
Colorado.
Full education to any school in Colorado. It includes your
Plus.
books, it includes everything.
And spending
Marilyn
money.
did not want to stay in Colorado, so she decided not to take the test because she might win it. And she wanted to go to a big school and prove to everybody that she could do it on her own. And at that time, we had some friends who were from Columbus. And he had graduated from Ohio State University and was telling Marilyn about Ohio State University. And she applied and was accepted. And that's where she went. And I don't have to tell you who she met there.
Well, you do have to tell me.
She met Gary Solomon, who was from Cleveland.
Who lives in the same
And
town.
that's how Colorado lost Marilyn.
Oh, it's my fault, like everything else.
I'm
Okay.
back one of these days.
Okay. And
Interesting. And what else?
they
Ellis.
got married.
They got married, and they had Stephanie.
Right.
And another brat.
And another brat, and Mark,
Okay.
and a couple of cats.
And today, living in
And
Pickerington,
today they are
Ohio.
living in Pickerington, Ohio.
Okay. And how about the third child?
Third child is Ellis. And Ellis
You thought I was a problem.
wasn't a problem until
He grew
late
up.
life, until as an adult. He was
Let's
never
stick
a
to the
problem.
facts here
None
now.
of the kids were problems. They were good children. Ellis went to school at the University of Colorado in Boulder. Decided he wanted to be a lawyer. At the end of 4 years of college, he decided that he really needed a little time off before going to law school. So he took a year off and worked as a waiter in a very exclusive restaurant for a while, for a year. And then he went back to school. He went to Denver
University of Denver.
University of Denver
Law school.
and has settled in Denver. And he is a very successful lawyer. Ellis got married in 1985 to Candy Fair, F-A-I-R.
For the record.
For the record, briefly, he and Candy were divorced. I think it was in 1986, and he remarried.
There were no children. from that.
No children. He remarried. He married a young lady named Paula Riley from Lincoln, Nebraska, and they were married. They're married 3 years. So
89.
They were married in August of 89? 89. And Ellis and Paula now have 2 children. Evan, who is 2 years old. His birthday is November 3rd.
November
And
6th.
November
Sixth.
6th, Jamie.
Sixth.
And
Jamie
Jamie
is the
was
third.
born November 3rd of this year. Jamie Catherine
92.
of, so they have a boy and a girl.
Okay.
And 2 different dates, but they both born on election day.
Okay. To finish this out, we have just a couple more minutes. Saul eventually retired from the Air Force. Tell me about that, when that was, and what you've been doing since.
Oh, that'll won't be
Driving
brief.
June
You
Crane.
better talk fast.
It's real brief. I retired the 1st of August, 1967.
And your rank at retirement?
Lieutenant Colonel.
Okay.
And then I did nothing till about February and March of the following year.
Do you notice the pattern here? After you leave the service, you seem to do nothing for a while? I just thought I'd bring that up. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
And then I got a call from a guy that I worked with on active duty and wanted to know if I wanted a civil service job. And I said, I want a job, but I don't think I can get a civil service job because I'm not on the register. He says, don't worry about it. Come in and see me. So I went in to see him. He gave me a bunch of forms. He says, fill them out and bring them back tomorrow. So I filled them out, brought them back, gave them to him. Following day, I got a call from civilian personnel, come in, we want to interview you for a job. I had a job.
Okay, and where was this job?
It was in Colorado Springs, but the idea of it, it was supposed to be a property administrative job with a contract administrative office that was gonna move to New Jersey. And I had to be willing to move. And we were willing to move. But it never materialized because, in the military, everything changes. Even though I was a civilian, military organizations come and go all the time. And they restructured the whole operation and everything stayed in Colorado Springs.
Okay.
So I had the job, but it was a temporary job because there was a hiring freeze for civil service. So every 3 months they had to get me reauthorized. Not reauthorized, but rehired.
Okay.
So that went on for a year and 9 months. They couldn't get me rehired the last 3 months because once I got that 3 months in, they'd had to make me permanent. They couldn't do that. So that was the end of the civil service job.
Where did you go from there?
From there, I went to work for RCA on a government contract in Colorado Springs. The
doing-
office was in Colorado Springs,
Okay.
but the contract was for logistics support in Alaska and in
Greenland.
Greenland.
Okay. And what about after that?
Well, it was 3 years of that, and they lost the contract, and ITT got the contract. So I went to work for ITT.
And how long did that last?
9 years.
9 years.
And
Retired.
then I retired.
From there. And that was when?
That was in 1985.
Okay. So you've been completely retired since then.
Yes.
And what have you been doing with yourself since then? Absolutely. Well, that's not true. What really? You do some traveling and visiting.
We do a lot of traveling, we do a lot of visiting. Saul doesn't have any hobbies, but he keeps busy. I travel more than he does because I'm quite active in Hadassah and our region.
Would you have a position with Hadassah?
Subject
I'm
to change.
subject to change. Right now I'm region treasurer, which covers a 6-state region, so it's quite a bit of money that
That's
I'm
how we
doing.
can afford to come out here.
But I travel 3 times a year with the region to go to board meetings.
And the fourth one, I go with you.
3rd one you go with me. 2 I go alone and 1 Saul goes with
It's
me.
only 2? I thought they were quarterly.
There's only 3. And other than that, we like to cruise, we like to visit. And
Like
we'd
to go
come
to
more
Vegas?
often if you'd kill your cats. And right.
Okay. Well, that does bring us just about to the end of the case anyway. So, thank you very much for spending the time to go over your lives and
Don't let it happen again.
and sharing it with whoever may at some point watch this tape. So, with that, we will conclude. And adios.
He's just snuffing. He's snuffing out.